Dear students, in this video presentation, I am going to explain basic theory behind NMR spectroscopy. When we record NMR spectrum of a compound, we will see different NMR signals in the spectrum. What exactly causes NMR signal, which is something that I am going to address through this video presentation. Well, you may recall the concept of electron spin. Like electron spin, atomic nucleus is having spin. This we call it as a nuclear spin. What exactly nuclear spin? A nucleus rotates on its own axis. Since it is rotating on its own axis, it will have some angular momentum. As we learned from quantum mechanics, electron spin is quantized. Similarly, atomic nucleus spin is also quantized. Let us consider the spin quantum number of a nucleus is I. The magnitude of the spin or total spin of the atomic nucleus is given by h cross multiplied by square root of I into I plus 1, and it is having 2I plus 1 spatial orientation. That means, suppose if spin of a nucleus is half, it will have either plus half state and minus half state, and total it has 2 spin states. And please remember that these spatial orientations are identical in absence of external magnetic field. Only when you keep in external magnetic field, one can observe there is a splitting of these nuclear spin states. Well, let me ask a question at this point. Whether all the nuclei present in the periodic table will give a NMR spectrum? Well, my answer is no. And it all depends upon what kind of nuclei that we are interested in. To answer this question, first of all, we have to know whether the particular nuclei is spin active or not. Now again I have another question. How do I know a particular nuclei is spin active or not? Because in the periodic table we have more than 110 elements, and how do I remember the spin numbers of the atomic nucleus? It's really a tedious job. Well, there is a thumb rule, and the thumb rule is basically showcased in this table. Just by looking at the number of protons and number of neutrons, we will be able to tell whether a particular nucleus spin is 0 or non-zero. From this information, we can say a particular nucleus is NMR active or inactive. Let us suppose we have certain atomic nucleus like carbon 12 and 16 oxygen, and these are having even number of protons and even number of neutrons, and the atomic nucleus spin will be 0, and obviously the carbon 12 and 16 oxygen do not give any NMR spectrum. On the other hand, if the number of protons and number of neutrons of your nucleus is odd, then that particular nucleus will have integer nuclear spin. The best example is the nitrogen 14. As we know that nitrogen has 7 protons and the 7 neutrons, and its spin is 1. The other two cases that we have is this: either number of protons can be even while the number of neutrons can be odd, or the number of protons can be odd or the number of neutrons can be even. And both these cases, or the atomic nuclei come under these two cases, will have off integer nuclear spin. And the fundamental question that I have asked, whether a particular nucleus is NMR active or inactive, one can address by looking at the its nuclear spin. If the nuclear spin what is determined based on this thumb rule is 0, then we say that particular nucleus is NMR inactive. On the other hand, if nucleus is having non-zero spin, then we say that particular nucleus is NMR active. Here are some examples: 1 hydrogen, 13 carbon, 15 nitrogen, 19 fluoride, and 31 phosphorus. All these atomic nucleus are NMR active whose spin is half, and carbon 12 and oxygen 16 both are NMR inactive because its nuclear spin is 0. The nitrogen 14, deuterium and boron 10 will have more than half spin, and they are also NMR active. Here is a table which gives the nuclear properties of some of the elements. As you can see, the spin is given in the second column. The spin can be a minimum of a half in the case of hydrogen and a few other atomic nuclei, and the spin can be maximum of 9/2 in the case of krypton, strontium, and so on. This diagram explains how nuclear spins are arranging or orienting in external magnetic field. Suppose if we have a nucleus with zero spin, no matter what kind of magnetic field that you are using, its nuclear energy state is always identical. It will not split. In other words, it is said to be degenerate. For example, if your nuclear spin is half, then according to 2i plus 1, there are two different orientations. One is plus half state, the other one is minus half state. So accordingly, we can observe one particular transition from plus half state to the minus half state. Similarly, if your nucleus is having one spin, then we can have three different spin states, and accordingly we can observe different transitions. Similarly, if you have a nucleus with a 3/2 spin, we can have five different orientations. Accordingly, we can have different transitions among these nuclear energy states. So as you can see from this diagram, as the spin quantum number of nucleus increases, the number of energy state increases, and accordingly the number of transitions also increases. Therefore, at the undergraduate level and the graduate level, we will only discuss about the low spin nuclear magnetic resonance and its concepts. The high spin nuclear magnetic resonance is somewhat complicated because of the so many transitions, and the spectrum is going to be complicated, so difficult to understand. So as a result, we will only focus about the half spin nuclear magnetic resonance. Unless and otherwise I mention, hereafter we are only going to focus on the half spin nuclear magnetic resonance. As we realize the fact that nucleus is having spin and it is also having charge, therefore according to electromagnetic theory, any spinning charged species will create a magnetic field. Likewise, the nucleus also creates a magnetic field because of its spinning motion. Now, the created magnetic field strength can be estimated by its magnetic moment. This is something similar to the magnetic field created by electric current flowing in a conducting coil. The right hand rule really helpful to determine the direction of the magnetic field which is created around a current carrying wire and vice versa. So the point here is, because of the spinning motion, the nucleus will behave like a tiny bar magnet. In a normal situation, if there is no external magnetic field, all the tiny nuclei bar magnets will have identical energy and they are said to be degenerate. Whereas if you keep the tiny nuclei bar magnets in the external magnetic field, we can see a nice alignment with respect to the applied magnetic field direction. Well, there are two different approaches to understand the concept of resonance in NMR spectroscopy. One is the classical description, the other one is quantum mechanical description. So we will go to the details of these two one by one. First, let us look into the classical description. As we learned from the previous discussion, certain atomic nuclei possess spin. As a result, they behave like a tiny bar magnets. The moment these nuclei is placed in external magnetic field, they rotate on its own axis. This rotational motion can be correlated with the gyroscopic motion. I am sure that most of you would have seen this gyroscopic motion, if not at least spinning top. So the point here is, atomic nucleus with non-zero spin will behave like a tiny bar magnet, and the moment it is placed in external magnetic field, they rotate on its own axis. This rotational motion has a special name and it is called precessional motion. And in what direction this tiny bar magnet is rotating in the space can be estimated by using this particular equation, where theta is the internal angle at which this particular magnetic vector is making with respect to the applied magnetic field direction. Since the atomic nucleus is rotating, it will have an angular velocity, and the angular velocity omega 0 can be calculated by using this formula. Angular velocity omega 0 is equal to gamma B0, where gamma is the gyromagnetic ratio of the spinning nucleus and B0 is the applied field strength. And from the angular velocity omega 0, we can obtain the angular frequency or Fresnel frequency, and this is also called as a Larmor frequency. Larmor frequency nu L is equal to gamma B0 by 2 pi. Now let us try to understand what is the classical description of NMR resonance. According to this concept, all the atomic nuclei which are having non-zero spin are going to precess in an external magnetic field with a certain frequency, and whose frequency is referred to as a Larmor frequency or the Fresnel frequency. And suppose if we supply a electromagnetic radiation whose frequency is exactly matching with the Fresnel frequency or the Larmor frequency, we can see a resonance condition. That means we can see a absorption peak in the NMR spectrum. Classical description of NMR can also be understood in terms of net magnetization. What do you mean by net magnetization? We understood from the previous discussion that the nuclei behave like a tiny bar magnets. When you place them in the external magnetic field, they behave like a tiny bar magnets. So they will try to align with respect to the applied magnetic field direction. At the same time, there are certain nuclei they will be opposing the applied magnetic field, and as a result, when you take the difference between the aligned and opposing, then there will be always a significant number of nuclei pointing towards the applied field direction. So you can see in this diagram there are 6 tiny bar magnets aligned with respect to the applied field direction, and the other there are 5 tiny nuclei they are opposing. As a result, when you take the difference between these two, so one nuclei will be excess in the applied field direction. So this is what is meant by the net magnetization. And the net magnetization vector, here it is represented with m naught. This is pointed towards the z direction because we have applied the magnetic field along the z direction. If you apply along the x-axis, so the net magnetization will be towards the x-axis. And so in this picture, what will be the magnetization in the other direction? For example, what will be the magnetization in the x-axis and what is the magnetization in the y-axis? And these directions, obviously the net magnetization will be 0. The magnetic vectors along the x-axis and y-axis will be 0 because we have not applied the magnetic field in that particular direction. However, if we apply the magnetic field in that particular direction, we can also see the x component, y component as well. And the takeover message here is that there is a net magnetization vector because of the applied magnetic field, and this net magnetization vector m0 is precessing with the certain frequency, and this Fresnel frequency is nothing but the Larmor frequency, and this can be obtained by knowing the applied magnetic field strength and also the gyromagnetic ratio of the precessing nuclei. And for your information, in the case of a proton, suppose if you keep a proton in the magnetic field of 1.4 Tesla, then it will precess roughly about 60 megahertz frequency. So under these circumstances, suppose externally if you supply electromagnetic radiation, to be precise the radio frequency, then it will absorb the radio frequency which is exactly matching with the Fresnel frequency, and we can see a resonance condition, and appropriate NMR signal can be observed in the spectrum. So this is what the classical description says. we can extrapolate the classical description of net magnetization vector little bit to understand how NMR signal is being detected by a NMR spectrometer. In a normal situation, all the magnetically active nuclei, when you place them in the external magnetic field, we observe a thermal equilibrium. What do I mean by thermal equilibrium? This is nothing but there are certain nuclei pointing towards the applied field direction, and there are certain number of nuclei opposing the applied field direction, and as a result there is a net magnetization vector pointing along the applied field direction. And further, I also mentioned that this net magnetization vector is precessing about the applied field direction with a frequency what we refer to as the Larmor frequency. So the whole picture what is referred to as a thermal equilibrium. Now, in order to observe the NMR signal, one has to disturb the thermal equilibrium. Unless we disturb the thermal equilibrium, we cannot observe any NMR signal from a given NMR spectrometer. Now the question is, how do we disturb the thermal equilibrium? The thermal equilibrium is generally disturbed by applying a radio frequency pulse. The radio frequency pulse is converted into a corresponding magnetic field, and whose frequency is matching with the Larmor frequency, and it is applied along the y direction. If you apply along the y direction, the signal, NMR signal, can be observed in the x direction. This is generally done through what is referred to as a receiving coil and a transmitter coil. They are pointed along the x and y axis. So general convention is that the RF pulse is applied along the x direction through the coil, and then the other x direction one can observe the NMR signal. When you apply the radio frequency pulse, what exactly happens? Initially, the net magnetization vector is pointed before applying the pulse along the z direction. Now, the moment you switch on the RF pulse, then it start tipping from the original direction, that is z direction, and it will start processing in the other directions. Now, in which direction it is processing is determined by how much duration the secondary magnetic field or the radio frequency pulse is applied. Generally, for NMR measurements, proton NMR measurements, the secondary magnetic field is applied about 10 to 12 microseconds along the y direction. So as a result, the moment you start applying the secondary magnetic field along the y direction, the net magnetization vector now start processing with the same Larmor frequency in the xy plane. Please remember that initially the xy component along this xy component magnetic component is 0, but because the secondary magnetic field is applied, now it is no longer 0, it will be maximum in that particular direction. But how the signal is being recorded? This is being recorded by switching off the radio frequency pulse which we have applied. As I mentioned, the pulse is applied for a duration about 10 to 12 microseconds, and then it is switched off. So as long as the pulse is on, the net magnetization vector is processing, and you will say maximum mxy component in the xy direction, and mz will be 0. But if the moment the pulse is off, then it will try to go back to its original position, and the magnetization vector going back to its original position or thermal equilibrium is referred to as relaxation. I am sure that you would have studied what is referred to as longitudinal relaxation and spin-spin relaxation. As long as the radio frequency pulse is on, normally we will see a maximum mxy component, and the moment it is switched off, this xy component start decaying with time. This decay behavior is also referred to as a free induction decay. Free induction decay, which means initially there is a thermal equilibrium. There are several nuclei in which a certain number of nuclei is pointed along the applied magnetic field, and there are certain number of nuclei opposing the applied magnetic field, and this one we have disturbed by applying a radio frequency pulse for an about 10 to 12 microseconds, and the moment this is switched off, there is no external force on these magnets they will try to go to the original thermal equilibrium freely. That is why it is referred to as a free induction decay. Now, suppose if you have only one type of nuclei in your system, then what you see, one time constant when you try to fit the free induction decay. On the other hand, if you have more than one nuclei is present in your system, you will see different time constants in the free induction decay. Now, how to extract the information, time information to the frequency information? Because frequency is something that we can easily understand and interpret to our system while deducing the chemical structure of a given unknown molecule, but not the time information. So this is generally done by a mathematical program, what is referred to as a Fourier transformation. As you know, Fourier transformations are mathematical transformation which allow us to convert one information into other information. Suppose if you have a time information, then that can be converted into frequency information, and vice versa is also possible. Overall, the recording the NMR spectrum is nothing but recording the free induction decay of the given system or given molecule. Once it is recorded, automatically there will be a free induction decay, and that free induction decay will be processed through Fourier transformation, and we can get a frequency versus intensity information in the NMR spectrum. For better understanding how the net magnetization vector behaves before and after applying the radio frequency pulse is shown in terms of an animated diagram here. You can see here, initially before applying the radio frequency pulse, the net magnetization vector which is shown in the red arrow, it is pointed towards the z direction, and the moment the RF pulse is applied, what you see is that it started rotating in the XY plane. You remember that I mentioned that the radio frequency pulse will not be a continuous pulse, it will be stopped after 10 to 12 microseconds. So the moment you switch off the pulse, then it will try to come back and align with respect to the original direction, that is nothing but along the applied field direction. Now you can see very clearly, so it is tipping, the moment the pulse is applied, it is tipping and started rotating in the XY plane, and once it is switched off, then it will try to go back to original position. And here, in what direction we are applying the radio frequency pulse is shown here. Generally we apply along the y direction through the coil, and then we can observe the NMR signal in this particular direction. I hope I might have convinced the classical description of NMR resonance and how the signal is being detected by NMR spectrometer. Having understood the classical description of NMR resonance, let us try to understand the quantum description of NMR resonance. The quantum mechanical description of net magnetization as well as the NMR resonance concept is illustrated in this diagram. For this, let us consider half spin nuclei. If the spin is half, then it will have two different nuclear spin states. One is a plus half state and minus half state. In absence of external magnetic field, both these spin states will have identical energy, and these are said to be degenerate. However, if you keep these nuclei in an external magnetic field of B0, then the total population will try to distribute among these two nuclear spin states, and these are referred to as alpha as well as beta. Please note this notation. In some of the textbook you may find it like a plus half state and minus half state. Conceptually both are same. If you look at the energetics of alpha spin state and beta spin state, the separation between these two is very small. To be precise, this is of the order of 10 raised to minus 25 joules. That means it is very small energy gap. As a result of which, the total population will try to distribute equally among these two nuclear spin states. It is almost equally but not exactly same. Suppose if the two spin states are equally populated, then there is no concept of NMR signal. It is the small population difference actually that is responsible for the NMR signal. And if you want in terms of numbers, I can give you, suppose if you keep a proton in an external magnetic field of 1.4 Tesla, it will precess at 60 megahertz, and the population difference is 6 out of 20 lakh nuclei. That means the alpha spin state will have slightly excess population as compared to beta spin state. Now the question is, how do I calculate the population of alpha spin state and beta spin state? Well, we have Boltzmann distribution law. According to the Boltzmann distribution law, one can calculate the population in the ground state as well as the population in the excited state. You also remember that the alpha spins, the spins in the alpha state are aligning with respect to the applied magnetic field. On the other hand, the spins in the beta state are opposing the applied magnetic field. And since there is a difference between these two spins, that is the difference actually responsible for the net magnetization. And now, suppose if you shine electromagnetic radiation onto this system, then we can observe resonance condition provided the externally applied electromagnetic radiation frequency is matching with the energy separation or the energy gap. When there is a matching of the frequency of the applied electromagnetic radiation, to be precisely, it is the radio frequency, with the energy separation, we can observe the alpha spins will make a transition to the beta spin state by flipping their spin. In other words, alpha spins will make a transition to the beta spin state upon observing the electromagnetic radiation, whose frequency is exactly matching with the energy gap between the alpha spin state and beta spin state. In a nutshell, according to the quantum mechanical description, when magnetically active nuclei is placed in presence of external magnetic field, we can see a separation between the two nuclear energy states. And then when you shine light, to be precise, it is the radio frequency, radio waves, whose frequency is matching with the energy separation between these two spin state. Alpha spins will make a transition to beta spin state by flipping their spin, and accordingly we can observe NMR signal in the NMR spectrum. Let us discuss few more fine details about quantum mechanical description of nuclear magnetic resonance. You remember there are certain nuclei in the periodic table. They possess spin, that means they rotate about their own axis, and we know that the nuclei is a charged species and it is rotating because of the spin. As a result, they create a magnetic field, and the strength of the magnetic field is measured in terms of magnetic moment. And this magnetic moment, according to quantum mechanics, is not a single quantity, it is a vector quantity. That means it will have three different components, and these magnetic components are no longer equivalent in presence of external magnetic field. They will have different orientation according to the quantum mechanics, and the number of orientations can be calculated using 2i plus 1 formula, and the length of the magnetic moment can be estimated using this formula, h cross multiplied by square root of I into I plus 1, where I is the nuclear spin quantum number. Similarly, in which direction or in which angle with respect to the applied magnetic field it is rotating, we can calculate or estimate using this formula. The energy of the nuclear spin state can be calculated by using this formula. This is nothing but the angular momentum multiplied by the external magnetic field. From this, we can also calculate the separation between the two nuclear spin states. The separation delta E is equal to gamma B0 multiplied by H cross. Of course, you know that H cross is nothing but H by 2 pi. Please remember this point, the separation between the two nuclear spin state in the case of a half spin nuclei is directly proportional to the applied field strength, and also it depends upon the gyromagnetic ratio gamma. I am sure that you know gamma is the unique quantity for a given nuclei. The quantum mechanical description of resonance can be understood using this cartoon diagram. You can see a magnetically active nuclei is placed in between a bar magnet. When RF pulse is applied, then the alpha spins will make a transition to the beta spin state, which are indicated with two different colors. On the right hand diagram, you can see the separation between the nuclear spin state linearly increases with the applied magnetic field. Initially, when the magnetic field is 0, then there is no separation. However, as it increases, and the separation also increases. Suppose if you keep a magnetically active nuclei at a particular magnetic field constant, then it will have that much energy, and when you shine light whose frequency is matching with that separation, then we can observe the resonance peak or NMR absorption peak in the spectrum. Well, this is all about the quantum mechanical description of nuclear magnetic resonance. And we can extrapolate this discussion to understand how the signal is being detected by a spectrometer. This concept will be somewhat similar to that of the classical description, which I have explained in the previous slides. You may recall in the classical description, I have used the net magnetization concept to explain how the signal is generated. However, here we are going to talk about in terms of alpha spin state and beta spin state, because if you are dealing with a half spin nuclei, it will have two different states, one is alpha and beta, and therefore it is appropriate if you talk about the alpha and beta spin states. Now, if you shine light onto a magnetically active nuclei which is placed in between a tiny bar magnet, the alpha spin states will make a transition to the beta spin state by absorbing appropriate radio frequency whose frequency is exactly matching with the energy gap of the alpha and beta. Now, as long as the RF pulse is on, the spins will be retained in the beta spin state, and the moment the RF pulse is switched off, then the beta spins will try to come back to the original position, that is nothing but the alpha spin state. This coming back from the beta spin state to the alpha spin state by nuclei is actually follows a exponential function, and the exponentially decaying function is generally referred to as a free induction decay, and it looks like this. The moment we switch off, you remember this particular width is generally related to the pulse width, that is nothing but the RF pulse. I mentioned that it will be applied for an about 10 to 12 microseconds and it will be switched off. The moment it is switched off, you can see it is decaying exponentially, and this exponential function, when you try to fit with the function, it will have different time constants, and each time constant is related with one particular type of nuclei present in your molecule. If you have n different type of nuclei in your molecule, accordingly n time constant we can obtain. This magnetization or it is relaxing with time, and this information we generally convert into frequency information by using of the so-called Fourier transformation. And you don't have to do anything manually, but it is already there in the software, and once the decay is obtained in an experiment, then we can simply convert that time information into the frequency information, and it will generate a frequency versus intensity graph in the output. Well, this is all about the quantum mechanical description of nuclear magnetic resonance. Previously we have discussed the classical approach to understand the NMR concept. Now we have finished the quantum mechanical description. The classical description is in terms of the nuclear net magnetization vector, and the quantum mechanical description is all about the alpha and beta spin state and its transition. Let me tell you one thing very clearly, that these two approaches are just two concepts to understand what is the origin for NMR signal and how this signal can be detected experimentally. Interestingly, even though we have two different approaches to understand the nuclear magnetic resonance, there is only one experiment that you can do to obtain the NMR spectrum of a given compound. In a typical NMR experiment, we dissolve the molecule in a deuterated solvent and we place the sample in a magnet, and then we perturb the system and we will see the FID, and the FID will be processed through Fourier transformation and we can obtain frequency versus the intensity graph. And in the spectrum we can see different peaks, each correspond to different type of nuclei, and that particular nuclei information we try to correlate with the molecular structure, and finally we will try to deduce the molecular structure of a unknown compound. Before I conclude my discussion on basic theory of NMR, I'd like to ask a question. What is the sensitivity of NMR signal? This is very fundamental and very relevant question one has to address. This is not only applicable to NMR spectroscopy, but this is also applicable to other spectroscopic technique as well, because the sensitivity is something actually related to the amount of the sample which is being consumed for a given analysis. Therefore, one has to know thoroughly the sensitivity of a signal. And strictly speaking, as compared to many of the other spectroscopic techniques, NMR is very insensitive technique. Let me tell you once again. So NMR is very insensitive techniques intrinsically. This is mainly because, let us take the example of half spin nuclei, and if you have a half spin, there are two spin state, alpha and beta states. And we just finished the discussion of what is the energy separation between the alpha and beta spin states. And I have already mentioned that the separation between these two states is very small, and it is of the order of 10 raised to minus 25 joules. Since the separation between these two states is very small, then naturally what happens, the total population try to populate both the spin state equally, and only slight excess population we can observe in the ground state, that is the alpha spin state. And when it comes to the signal detection, the signal detection is something related to the excess population in the alpha spin state. When you shine RF pulse, the excess spins which are present in the alpha spin state are responsible for the transitions. So if you have more nuclei at alpha state, then obviously one can observe more transition, and more transition lead to more signal and better the sensitivity. However, in this particular case, I already gave one number. In the case of the proton nuclei, suppose if you keep a proton nuclei in 1.4 Tesla and the alpha spin state is slightly excess as compared to beta spin state. How much it is? It is just about 6 nuclei is excess in the alpha spin state as compared to beta spin state among the 20 lakh population. That means if you see in the alpha spin state 20 lakh 6, whereas in the beta state you can see 20 lakh. So only the difference is 6 population. So this 6 population is something actually causes the NMR transitions and the corresponding signal in the NMR spectrum. So to improve the NMR signal, one has to improve the number of transition from alpha spin state to the beta spin states. Now the question is, how do you increase the number of transition? Yes, we can increase the number of transition by increasing the population in the alpha spin state and decreasing the population in the beta spin state. This can be done by increasing the energy gap between the alpha spin state and beta spin state. How the energy gap can be increased? One approach is that we can increase the field strength so that the energy separation can increase. You may recall the formula which I have given you. If you have a two spin state, the energy separation is actually related to delta E is actually related to the applied field strength. If the applied field strength is increased, accordingly the separation between the alpha and beta spin state increases. So therefore, naturally what happens, when the separation is increasing, there is a more population will try to be present in the alpha spin state rather than going to beta spin state. So this is one way that one can increase the population difference between the alpha and the beta spin state. The another approach is that one can reduce the temperature so that the population again will increase in the alpha spin state and decrease in the beta spin state. This we can understand by the famous Boltzmann distribution law. And therefore, the NMR signal sensitivity can be increased by increasing the applied static magnetic field. In order to enhance the signal sensitivity, the commercially available NMR spectrometers are using higher and higher magnetic field. And it is because of this reason the dimension of the NMR spectrometer keep on increasing. With this, we have come to the end of the presentation on basic theory of NMR spectroscopy. In this module, I have discussed what is the basic principle of NMR spectroscopy, what exactly causes the NMR spectroscopy and its signal, what kind of nuclei will give you NMR spectrum, what kind of nuclei do not give you NMR spectrum, what are the two different approaches that we can understand the NMR spectroscopy, the classical approach and the quantum mechanical approach we have discussed. Similarly, we have also discussed how the signal can be experimentally detected. I have tried to explain by both methods, and similarly I have also explained what is the NMR signal sensitivity, how important it is and how it can be improved. I have discussed. And if you have any doubts on the content what is presented in this module, I suggest you to give your comments in the comment box, or else you can also write to me to my email ID. I am sure that you are having my email ID. And in the next module, we can discuss about chemical shift, what is the origin of chemical shift, how we can understood the chemical shift trends, and how we can make use of the chemical shift to interpret the chemical structure of unknown compounds. Thank you for listening.